Hello, learning and measurement enthusiasts. Dr. Alaina here. I am so excited to have Dr. Lola Gershfeld with us. She is one of our amazing thought leaders who's going to lead us through a case study of how do we show the value of what we do? What are the tactical steps that we can take to measure soft skills? And how do we get out of the weeds with some of the common challenges around measuring soft skills? So that's what we have in store for you. Without further ado, let's get to know Dr. Lola. Lola, tell us a little bit about your business and what brought you to start this very special business that you have.
Thank you, Alaina, and I'm so excited to be here. I started this business out of desperation. I think many of us do that, right? Out of desperation to find the answer. Why do we get into conflicts in the workplace? I remember working as an HR manager, and you have people coming to your office complaining or blaming or crying, and you try to help them and be empathic leader, and you think it's going to help, but 2 weeks later they are back in your office, and then you have troublemakers or problem employees where you have to write them up and get them fired or discharge them, and then you have to find new people, and it would become very exhausting to me, but turnover would increase, and you feel like in business it's a normal thing is to have turnover. But then I became a CFO, and I saw the cost of that turnover. It was very high, and our companies would really not grow very far when we keep turning people, because it takes time for people to learn the process, to learn the new, the way we work. So, and products that we sell. And that was very difficult, and I was very confused. But then I became a board member, and at the board level, you can't change people. Unfortunately, you can't get rid of board members so easily. So, and it was very fascinating to me that these highly intelligent people could not talk to each other. I was confused, first of all. Why is it possible? One person would get angry, the other person would shut down. And no matter what I did or tried to help them to communicate or, negotiate or have some insight, they would not talk. And board meetings would be very long and with no progress. And you sit in the board meeting and you think to yourself, when is this going to end? And where can I get a drink? And I don't even drink. I don't even drink, but I had this hopelessness and desperation. So I decided to make this as a goal, to find the answer to this long-term process. And I went out and got lots of books, Good to Great, and Primal Leadership, and Emotional Intelligence, and 7 Habits to Highly Effective Manage. So I read all the books. I went to trainings, and none of the books really helped me to repair the connection, which I learned after I went back to school and got my doctorate. I was sitting in a couples workshop, and this lady was talking about attachment and how couples would get into these patterns and in conflict, and how emotion was really driving these patterns. And I thought to myself, wait a second. All workplace conflict is all about attachment, all about that emotional disconnection that happens in the workplace, in the boardroom. Doesn't really matter what level and where you are in our workplace. This is the problem. They lack emotional connection. So I started to write about it. I flew actually to New York, studied with Sue Johnson, who was a developer of emotionally focused therapy. And I started to bring these skills and tools into the boardroom, into the teams, and things started to change in front of my eyes. So I started to write about it like crazy. I started to create a course about it. And now I've done this. I developed this emotional connection process where people can use step-by-step approach, using the attachment framework, using the emotions to understand how to repair the relationship,
Mm.
because conflict is the inflammation. The virus is emotional disconnection. Emotional disconnection for people who seek connection. We are human bonding mammals. We seek connection with people we depend on.
Mm.
Is a danger cue for them when when the connection has been lost.
Mm.
So people don't address the right things when they deal with conflicts in the workplace. They address the symptoms. They never get to the heart of the problem, which is emotional connection.
Wow. Dr. Lola, I just was at the HR Southwest conference in Dallas like 2 days ago. I'm sitting in a conference presentation, and a gentleman is talking about trust as the root cause of all HR problems. And he talks about all these symptoms like lack of engagement, lack of morale, drama, conflict, productivity, right? And I love what you're saying. And this literally was just said to me a couple of days ago that so many of us, in as organizational leaders, owners of businesses, or internal employees, we're constantly putting out these fires. We're dealing with the lack of productivity. We're dealing with the lack of engagement. We're trying to deal with the lack of morale. And at the end of the day, it's not any of those things. It's a deeper rooted problem that we need to put our finger on and our focus on and try to dig ourselves out of that hole. And so I think whether it's trust or a lack of connection that we can solve through emotional sort of nurturing, self-awareness and other things, which I know you'll tell us more about. I love that we need to spend more time figuring out the root cause of the things that we often spend 80% of our time dealing with the symptoms of the root cause, and it ends up getting us nowhere. So I'm grateful that you're calling that out. I think we need to hear more of that. Let's stop wasting time putting band-aids on things and actually get underneath the rocks and the rugs and the dirt and look at what's really contributing to those symptoms in organizations. And it sounds like for you, it's that lack of connection or disengagement, and that you use an emotional connection process to help foster that connection again. And so, as we talk about your case study, I'm looking forward to learning how you've not only helped your clients to pinpoint how do they know that that's the root cause? How do you get buy-in with them? And then how do we then navigate demonstrating that you've actually made an impact, you've made a difference in those root causes through some of the work that you do? So I look forward to getting there. Just so that we all know, how do you work with organizations? Do you offer, I heard you say you have courses. Can you just say really briefly, like, what are the things that you can do to help organizations, to help maybe teams, groups, whatever, to get out of the weeds when it comes to lack of connection and get some of those results?
Yes, we help organizations to master relationships,
Mm-hmm.
because relationships is what keeps the culture positive. Relationships is what keeps people motivated, engaged, and thriving in their company. So, what we teach through our framework of using the attachment science and emotions, we teach people how to repair, strengthen, and nurture relationships. And when I say relationships, a lot of people pay attention to client relationship, right?
Mm-hmm.
We want to have good relationship with our client, but what I'm talking about is internal relationships,
Mm-hmm.
relationships specifically between manager and their direct reports, and within the team,
Mm-hmm.
between the peers. The manager's job is to recognize when there's a disconnection in that relationship, to be
Mm-hmm.
aware of it, number one, right? To sense that there's a disconnection, and to help direct reports to be connected, first of all, with each of their direct reports, and then recognize when there's a disconnection between team members and
Mm-hmm.
help them to repair that connection.
Mm-hmm.
Many times the starting point is when people, like you said in your other meeting, why are you here? Do you want to solve the problem, or are you aspiring to something?
Mm,
So when people call us, number one, they may have a problem. They may
mhm,
have a team that is not working very well. So we would help them to either first do the training to recognize, to understand what's going on in their pattern, in their dynamics that is
mm,
happening, or we do the reconnection sessions for them. So we help people to repair the relationship, and then we do the training, because
mhm,
ultimately we want people to learn this process. We want them to learn the roadmap on
mhm,
how to repair the connection, how to pay
mhm,
attention, how we trigger each other.
mhm,
What are we triggered? How do we feel? How do we talk about it, that what
mhm,
we feel? Because there's no language right now. There's no, people like say, like Brene Brown, you have to be vulnerable, but people don't know how to be vulnerable. You have to give feedback. Well, feedback is it's traumatic for people. So you have to create this secure relationship so you can provide feedback and people will take it with open mindset
mhm,
instead of becoming defensive. It all has to be with that security in that relationship. So in our training programs, we provide training. We teach internal trainers, we provide certification for internal trainers, how to teach this program, how to teach this process into their companies. We provide training for managers, how to use this process with their direct reports. And we provide training for HR managers or coaches so they can integrate this process into their company. Everybody has to learn this process,
mhm,
because if we don't have this roadmap,
mhm,
we will be constantly in these negative patterns,
mhm.
negative cycles,
Yeah.
which will continue to create and fuel conflicts
Mhm.
and
And
disconnection, because
yeah.
conflict can be
Mhm,
visual or not visible,
mhm,
right? Disengagement is a form of disconnection.
mhm,
There is a conflict happening, it
mhm.
just it's not visible.
Yeah. I love everything that you've shared. And I just want to summarize. So, whether as a listener, maybe you manage an internal training department, or perhaps as a listener, you own a business just like Dr. Lola and you sell programs, coaching, consulting services, things of this nature. I think there's a common process and a common challenge that we all are undertaking. And I love what you said about trigger. Whether a client comes to you, Dr. Lola, and says something like we have a problem or we want to create something, or if you're an internal leader and someone comes to you and says we want this solution, there is some kind of trigger. And I think sometimes we just run right by that trigger. Like someone is coming to us with something, and it's so wonderful that we pause and we just take a moment and we understand, well, what kind of trigger is that? Is this a problem we're trying to solve? Or are we trying to create something new? Or, as is the case, whether you're a learning business owner or you're an internal employee, sometimes we get requests to do something and the requester themselves doesn't know why they're doing it. So I think we might find ourselves in one of those three buckets. Someone clearly has got a problem they want you to solve, or they're trying to create something new within the team, within the organization, a department, or they have absolutely no idea what they're trying to do, but they think you can help them. In either way, we have to take one of those roads and unpack that, because if we don't, it'll be really difficult for us to measure and monitor and ultimately prove that their investment in you. So, in this case, one of Dr. Lola's programs, or it could be a program you're building internally, it's an investment. Is that investment delivering what the promise is? And I believe it really starts with that trigger. What kind of trigger is it? So I love that you've shared and unpacked that in your experience, Dr. Lola. What I want to take
Thank you.
us to next, as we start unpacking your success story of how you have proven and shown that the investment in your program actually made a difference, I'd like you to share. I know as we do more of this work, we learn and we get better at demonstrating that what we're doing is making a difference. Can you share, Dr. Lola, what are some of the biggest challenges that you experienced in trying to measure and monitor the success of what I would call your soft skills programs and services? What are some of those biggest challenges for you?
Well, I think biggest challenges is to identify what are the capabilities people need, because
Mm,
we think about emotional intelligence, Daniel Goleman work, and he identified these four quadrants, self-awareness, social awareness, or self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and then relationship management.
mm,
And in each of these quadrants, you want to be able to identify how do you actually become self-aware. What is it that you need to do to create that, to increase that self-awareness? How do you what is it that you need to self-manage? What are the capabilities, what are the action items, or what the behaviors, or the things that you need to do to become more in tune, socially aware, and relationship?
mhm,
So what when we did our research, I started, I mean, my research became because I didn't know that, like I said, I was reading primal leadership and emotional intelligence books, and there was no roadmap. Here are the things. It was just talking, you should be doing this, or these teams who do this, they act like this.
mhm,
But to train yourself, or to train our leaders, to train our employees how to be emotionally intelligent, there was no such roadmap. So
mm,
when I came to the attachment and emotionally focused therapy, and I started to identify what is it that we need to repair the relationships, I
mhm,
started to see that the process of actually identifying the triggers, identifying your raw spots,
mm,
talking about emotions, like articulating, organizing emotions, having the language for emotions, identifying what is that image looks like in that moment,
mm,
because our process is very present oriented process. Emotion is what really drives us to action, to behaviors. So when we have a structure, a process by which we can identify, and we go through this process of learning about ourselves through that process of identifying those emotions, image, bodily sensations, our fears. What does we say to ourselves? What meaning do we make? And then what actions do we do to protect ourselves? And what do we need in this relationship, in this moment?
mm,
What we started to see is that people's self awareness increased.
mm,
They became more in tuned to their personal emotional experience, internal emotional experience, by taking the time, organizing, slowing things down, and articulating that type of experience through this process. That's number one. Number two, what we saw is they had the tools to actually repair the connection. So by doing this process again, by asking, by recognizing how they got triggered, the disconnection, what happened to them, what they do in that moment that causes the other person to disconnect, but what they need is this attachment needs to know that this person cares about them, they're important to these key core attachment needs that they suddenly lost in the moment of disconnection. We started to see that people's relationships became stronger.
mm,
They felt more safer with each other. They felt more open, valued, cared for. They felt appreciated. They felt grateful. They felt hopeful. And they felt not alone in that
mhm,
moment.
mhm,
So we started to see that not only their self awareness improved,
mhm,
they started to tune into each other
mm,
better, so they could catch those moments of disconnection faster.
mhm,
They could catch the moment when the face changes, or the body language changes, and they would say, like, wait a second, let's
mhm,
just slow it down, something happened. i
mhm,
want to i want to be there for you right in that moment. So self-approved awareness, social awareness, relationships improved, self-management improved, because when they started to understand about their internal experience and their raw spots and emotions, they started to feel more in balance.
mm,
So now when relationship is improved, they no longer get triggered
Mm-hmm.
as fast as before.
Mm-hmm.
So that's when I started to see, oh my gosh, this is the roadmap on how to improve all of these four quadrants.
Mm. I love that. So, what you just shared in just a wonderful story is what becomes possible when we figure out a structured, operational, and it sounds like systematic way that you can repeat an outcome. And I love this because soft skills are this squishy, big, fluffy, ambiguous. Like soft skills are like communication. Well, what does that mean? What does that look like? And the answer is anything, right? Self awareness, relationships, conflict, drama, all of these things that are really dynamic and nuanced. The reason we struggle with not only putting our finger on, like, what's the root cause of the problem that's contributing to these lack of these things that we want to be present, and what do we do about it? And so, what I hear you say is that not only did you ask the questions like, what capabilities do people need to get down this path of repairing relationships? That's a really big question mark. And it's one that actually can be answered in lots of different ways. You've clearly developed an approach that works. And what I like about your approach is that you have this leading indicator. I talk about dominoes all the time. If we think about dominoes and we want to knock one over, that will make every other domino also fall just because we knocked over the first one. I think that is a great way of thinking about a leading indicator. What's that thing that we have to focus on first? And when we do, other things become possible. And whether you knew it or not, Dr. Lola, you had used this domino effect in your approach to like making a change, which is we discovered that when people build self awareness, all the other things become possible. People start to relate to each other differently. They value each other. They listen. There's more connection. And it's all through this process of emotional triggers and awareness around that, which will be different for everyone. But what they have in common is, regardless of that, your triggers might be this and my triggers might be that, we all have them. And when we are more aware of those triggers, that's when the dominoes start to knock over. And so, listeners, the point of this case study series is for you to take some of these really meaningful but simple tidbits back to your work. And I think, Dr. Lola, we found that, and I know you're going to share more, but I just want to say how excited I am that you've clearly identified your domino, that thing that makes everything else easier, and it's something you can measure and monitor that gives you a sense of, are we moving in the right direction? Because, well, what if people's self-awareness isn't evolving? We need to work a little more there. Or what if they have a high level of self-awareness going into the program? Well, maybe this is a high emotional intelligent group that we can do a little bit more with. So I think there's a lot of opportunity in just that self-awareness piece. And so I'm curious how much that may be integrated into your own assessment tools. I know that you have them. So it sounds like, if we summarize the challenges question that I asked, that being able to answer the question, what capabilities do people need to accomplish the outcomes? Like, we have to be able to operationalize that, whether you're an internal person writing your own curricula or you're hiring a vendor like Dr. Lola and many others to come in and help your team. I would be making sure that they can help you operationalize what are those capabilities that people need to get to these outcomes. And if that's not documented somewhere, or they're not willing to work with you to help unpack that, that would be a really big missing piece. And you have a solid framework that you can use with any, you might have a few different dynamics. Like you said, we're working with peers and we're trying to, repair relationship in a peer dynamic that likely looks different, or we're trying to repair relationships between teams and their direct reports that looks a little different, but the framework's probably the same. It's just how you apply it. So I love this starting place. I'm excited to talk more about your assessment. So you've worked on creating your own way of baselining probably the kinds of capabilities that people have going into the program so that you can show some of that change. So tell us more about like why you decided to build an assessment. What does it evaluate in your program? And I know you're excited to share with us some changes that you've been able to capture through that assessment. So just talk us through that process a little bit.
Yes, our assessment reflects the interactions that you have with your manager and interactions that you have with your peers. Because like I said, that because we use the attachment framework, it's very important for us to recognize how people feel. I mean, you were talking about the domino effect. Burton Lanfey, who wrote the first system theory, he said that if you want to change a system, like a living system, like a relationship, right? A relationship is a living system. It always changes. You have to identify the core organizing variables that are driving that system. And both Carl Rogers and John Bowlby said that that core organizing element is emotion. So that's why I think our process is so powerful, because it is emotion focused. It is about organizing emotion. It is about identifying and understanding how to tune, how to work with that emotion. And I tell people, you don't have to be a therapist, you don't have to be a psychologist, everybody can learn how to work with emotion. And so when we designed this assessment, we looked at this attachment framework. And in attachment framework, the key identifying question in attachment relationships is, are you there for me? ARE, are you accessible to me? Are you responsive to me? Will you be there when I call? Are you accessible in terms of, are you accessible to me? How do I know what's going on with you? Are you open to share that? And are you engaged with me? So all of these are emotional variables. So when we developed this assessment, we looked at these key attachment questions, how people feel in terms of reaching out to each other, in terms of creating that safe space, in terms of repairing connection after conflicts. I mean, conflict could be resolved, but you still, if you don't feel connected, you will feel still not heard, not valued, not important, feel alone. And so you will be disconnected. So we ask all these questions because relationship, in how you repair relationship, is like a mirror of your culture. This is what defines your culture. What type of relationships you have, and how well can you repair the relationships after a disconnection happens. And it's 50 questions. And then we took these questions and we divided them into these capabilities. What capabilities do you need to achieve this particular feeling? And what capability do you need? So we identified 24 capabilities on creating this safety in the organization, in sim setting. And our assessment report actually organizes these capabilities of your highest capabilities, like the top five highest, then the next one. And it provides what to look for, why these capabilities are so high, so you can increase your self-awareness. You can understand how you impact each other in your conversations, in your interactions with each other. And then we provide team report, which we take like everybody's score, and we put them as a team, your highest capabilities, lowest capabilities, and where the gaps are. So you can, through the emotional connection process, what happens is, as people start to use the process and learn how to tune to each other, how to recognize, repair the relationship, be there for each other, all of these capabilities improve. So it's not like we tell people, you need to learn how to integrate emotions, or you need to know how to nurture connection. By practicing these over and over again, the process, you increase all of these capabilities. So it's very exciting.
I can tell you're excited, and I love hearing all about that as an assessment and data nerd myself. It sounds like a wonderful tool. And here's why I think it's wonderful. You're using one tool in 4 different ways. First, baseline data. We cannot capture growth and change without any kind of baseline to compare it to. You'd be surprised, Dr. Lola, how few people capture baseline data, and then the program is over and they're scrambling to try and figure out what kind of change happened without a baseline. It's really difficult. So you give that baseline through the assessment. Many assessments can do that, but you're clearly offering that. And the tool in of itself is meant to drive your number one domino. It just by taking the tool and reviewing the report, you are going to be more self-aware. You might not like what you learn. And sometimes that cognitive dissonance is actually a really good thing, because you're like, well, I thought I was better at this than this report says that I am. What that does is it gets you into conversation with a coach, a peer, a mentor, whoever is facilitating that feedback. I love it. Cognitive dissonance is never a bad thing. Next, this tool gives you the capability of monitoring growth. So people might take this. I know you have an example of pre-post stuff, but if people engage with this practice of repairing relationships, focusing on emotional triggers and working on that, that will be a thing we do our whole life long. But let's say you've done that in a 6-month program. Now it becomes a pulse check. So you've got baseline data and you've got these different pulses, and you can see how people's strengths are growing over time. It's wonderful for that. And it's a continuing education tool. So let's just say you have a 6-month engagement with a client. They get their baseline data. They're working with you in a variety of ways. They've got that pulse check, so you can see maybe over a period of every month how those strengths are evolving. At the end of that, you can see some patterns that say, hey, Dr. Lola, you really grew in these areas, but these other areas are pretty much staying the same. This is a great opportunity for you to focus on nurturing this, and here's what that might look like. So it provides a continued pathway for growth, because growth, no matter what it is in the soft skills arena, growth never ends. And so it's wonderful to be able to give people something that says, here's how you've grown within our program, and to continue your evolution, here's where you might want to focus based upon those results. So I love that this tool is so dynamic and offers so much. And I'm really proud that you've integrated that. As we come to
Thank
the
you.
close
Thank
of our
you. Dr.
conversation.
Lena, coming from you means a lot to me.
Oh,
Thank you.
well, I love it.
I so appreciate it. Thank you.
You're so welcome, and excellent work. What I'd love for you to do now is just show, because a question that I get quite often from people is, okay, so we're collecting this data, Alaina. How should we demonstrate that? How do we collect and how do we display the data from these tools to make it meaningful in a conversation, in a story, something like that? So if you don't mind, go ahead and share your screen with us and just show how you're doing that, and maybe quickly talk through why you display it in that way so that people can get some ideas and what they can do with their own assessments or other data they might collect.
This company wanted to train their internal trainers with our EMC process, emotional connection process, to help them so they can teach their managers and their groups that they serve with this process. So we asked them to take this assessment, and the assessment for this team, it's 21 people, looked at 24 capabilities, like I said, and the color code for each of these capabilities: red is for emotional safety and connection, blue is for relationship building and support, and yellow is for team dynamics and culture. So the top rated capabilities for this particular group shows from 0 to 5, and it just displays from the top to bottom, and we can show all capabilities this way right here, and you will see it, or the first 10. And then we have the lowest capabilities, lowest rated capabilities, again, from the bottom to the top. Okay. And then you have the assessment distribution. This particular shows that some team members feel disconnected and some feel very connected. And you can see this big gap. But the average, on average, people are, so to speak, closer to connection than disconnection. And so what we want is we want to shorten this gap and we want to bring everything higher. So the average becomes a little higher. So then we look at the capability gap and we see, like self-awareness, you see this big long spread between the lowest number and the highest number. And here's the target score, which they can work toward to improve those capabilities by going through the process and practicing the EMC process. And so you have all different, the 24 capabilities. You can see where the gaps are and how wide the spread is, from the shorter spread to the highest, to the longest spread. You can also sort it by name of these capabilities, so you can see from A to Z, and you can look at any particular capability to see where people are. So then I'm going to go back to the average normalized. And then if we look at the post-training score, you could see that this group took the EMC training masterclass, and they practiced, and then they had 3 follow-up sessions, and then they practiced for 6 months. And so as you can see that their scores have shifted. So before they had, like, self-awareness was the highest gap. So if we go to self-awareness, we can see it shortened the gap, and the target score became much closer. Their average score is closer to the target score. So that's a huge improvement. They actually had 13% improvement in self-awareness. They also had, conflict repair also improve, connection growth improved. I mean, every score that you look closely, like, so if I just go back to the pre-training, okay, you could see where they are, and I can do it by name, so we can just look at just each capability and see where they are in terms of the average score to the target score, and then look at the post training. You could see a shift. Some of them actually reach the target score. A lot of them are close to the target score. And so that's a great improvement. So people actually feel more connected. They feel closer. They feel like they can reach for each other.
Mm-hmm.
They can talk about their vulnerability. They feel less alone. You could also see that the graph moved up a little bit here.
Mm-hmm.
And the lowest actually increased the score. It became conflict repair is the lowest still, which is still high, but they can still continue to learn how to repair conflicts. And the top capability increased the number in
Mm-hmm.
terms of the scoring.
That's great. I do have a couple questions and some suggestions, but would like to come back to just seeing each other. Love
Yeah.
that.
Okay. Perfect.
Yeah, thank you.
Perfect.
Thank you for sharing that. Um,
Yeah.
so, as I love to do, is to share ideas and reflections as we look to close up our conversation. Well, first, the dashboarding tool, it's beautiful, it's intuitive. We can see, I love the idea of organizing by what's our strongest capability to our weakest and vice versa. What I would love to see more clearly is the differences in pre and post. So if there's a way for you to offer a dashboard that shows, these capabilities, these are the ones that got closest to the target. So just organizing the differences more intuitively. I have a
Okay.
client
That's great.
I have a client that organizes and we'll meet this client in another case study recording. They have a framework just like yours. They have a couple of core capabilities similarly that they like to see people improve upon. And so for every one of those capabilities, which may not be necessary for your assessment because it has so many capabilities, but for them, they just have, let's just say 6. And so for every point that somebody does a touch point, whether it's through the assessment or through a different data collection mechanism, there's a graph for every capability, which you can do per individual or per team or group, and you can see
Mhm.
the changes. So at the baseline
Mhm.
versus the midpoint versus the end of the program, we can see those changes, and they actually calculate it at a statistical significance. Like, is there a statistically significant difference? There's an effect size. So I think that would be really interesting for you to offer you might have 25 capabilities, but where did we see the biggest growth between the baseline and the additional data points? Where have we seen no growth? So I think you might be able to take those 25 capabilities and just call out the biggest significances in change over time. So that can be, here's the greatest growth that we've seen. Here's if things went down or if they are stagnant. I think that would be really powerful as a conversation tool just to narrow people's focus because there is so much data there. The other
Oh, I think
thing,
that's very important. Definitely. Yes. Thank you.
yeah,
Thank you, Dr. Alaina.
the other thing that I think many people are going to be wondering, and this isn't unique to your program, it's just sort of the whole soft skills conversation. You've done a wonderful job capturing what's the expected change, operationalizing from a behavior action perspective. What do we expect will happen throughout the program, and you're capturing those changes. Most people are going to be left wondering, well, what's the business effect? So what?
Hmm. Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
what? We've got people are more emotionally intelligent. We've got people being able to repair relationships. Now, obviously, you and I know that there's a lot of power in that change. But for many other people, they might say, well, so what? What does the business get out of people being able to repair relationships through this emotional connection process? And so, what you said at the very beginning of our conversation, and what I heard said at the HR Southwest conference by another expert in a different realm, that we spend 80% of our time focusing on the band-aids of deeper rooted issues. So we are focused on the symptoms and trying to put out those symptoms. What's interesting about those symptoms, though, is they are often the business results that we will tangibly see evolve. So, what I would suggest to anyone that wants to add a layer of business outcomes is that in addition to the assessment, where you're getting a baseline of people's emotional capabilities and relationship capabilities, you're also doing an intake of those symptoms. So, what does conflict look like? What does productivity look like? What does morale look like? There's all these different symptoms of the root cause of a lack of connection or a lack of trust in the other example that I shared. And what's great about this is existing research has already documented the relationship between trust and psychological safety and emotional connectedness, belonging. There's all kinds of research out there that says when these things are present, we see an increase in productivity, morale, engagement, turnover, etc. Not an increase in turnover, a decrease in turnover, but a positive change nonetheless. And so, what you could do is to capture some of those symptoms. I think of those as lagging indicators that your program has made a difference. And those are also really wonderful business metrics that stakeholders will care about. And if you're doing programs that are 6 months long, it's a wonderful way to tell the story of here's how people's emotional capabilities are shifting, and here are how some of those lagging indicators are evolving within our target population. Because, of course, if we're looking at productivity, we should be looking at the productivity of just the participants in the program, not of the organization as a whole, because they're not all getting the intervention. So whatever data you're looking at, make sure that the productivity, engagement, morale data is, of course, within that same target population as is going through the program. I think you would have an incredibly powerful story of change to show.
I like that. So you would collect the data from that same group
That's right.
that is taking, yes, and then you measure the either productivity or morale or
Mm-hmm.
engagement,
Mm-hmm.
turnover within that group.
That's right. And you could, if you can't get the data from your client, which is sometimes difficult to do, you can ask like one question, like on your team. So if you want to capture turnover, but maybe you don't get the large data from HR, for example, you could ask if you're working with leaders or even with a group of peers, in the last month or quarter, how many people left, like what was the turnover rate for your team, so that can at
Mhm.
least give us a base. All we're trying to get is a baseline. What does turnover look like on your team over the last month? And you could even ask that. Tell us about how many people left your team in the last month, quarter, year. And you can get
Mhm.
a general
Mhm.
sense. It doesn't have to be perfect. You're just trying to get an overall sense of about what turnover looks like. You could ask about engagement or morale. You could ask, or even belonging. The work best friend question is a really great indicator of connectedness and belonging. Do you have a work best friend? Or like in the meeting that we had last week where we talked about, you know, if you're feeling unsafe at work, or if you're really dealing with a big conflict at work, who will you talk to about it? Who are you most likely to talk to? That's an indicator of, do you feel safe talking to somebody at work, or would you talk to your spouse, your sister, your best friend? So yeah, those are some really simple questions you can ask that get at that same symptom data that might not actually need you to get business level data from the client, because that may or may not be feasible or even just accessible. But it doesn't mean you can't get some kind of indicator of those same symptoms over time.
Yeah, that's very good. Yes, I
Awesome.
appreciate that. Thank you.
You're
Thank
very
you, Dr.
welcome.
Alaina.
Well, this has been a very enjoyable conversation. Thank you, Dr. Lola, for sharing your process, your challenges, your reason for doing this work in the first place, which I know many of our listeners will resonate with. So, if they'd like to learn more about your work, where should they go?
Well, first of all, I want them to have hope that they don't have to be stuck. There is a process that you can learn to repair your relationships, but I am a founder of EMC Leaders, so they can go to emcleaders.com. They can also buy my books on Amazon. They can listen to our podcast, The Leader in You. And Dr. Alaina, you were on our podcast, which was very good. And that they can go to our YouTube channel, EMC Leaders, connect on LinkedIn. We have a lot of resources, and we are training certified trainers in different countries. Which we have in Ireland, UK. We are training one in China. We are talking with Greece. So a lot of people are very interested in bringing this process into the workplace because people feel very exhausted from being in conflicts and figuring out how to deal with these negative patterns. So I want you to know there's hope, there is a way, and attachment science really gives us that roadmap.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for sharing your
Thank you so much.
wisdom and the opportunity that you offer to make the world a better place. We thank you for that, for the work that you do. Listeners, you can enjoy a whole bunch of assets to come out of this conversation, including a download of some of the simple steps to take to better measure outcomes of your soft skills programs. And of course, all the ways to stay in touch with me, your host, and with Dr. Lola. We look forward, Dr. Lola, to staying in touch with you. And thank you for what you do.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lena. It was a pleasure to be here with you.